Welcome. My name is George Pearson and I run the How To Gurus channel here on YouTube. Most of the videos in my channel are short demonstrations of the different tools and techniques you'll find in various software programs. Right now I have several hundred of these quick videos available on YouTube. This video though is different. This is part of a new series of longer demonstrations that I'm doing to show you how to complete complex projects from start to finish using a variety of techniques and tools. All of the images I use in these projects are in the public domain, and I've included a link to the pictures in the video description in case you want to work along using the same images. Okay, let's move on to the project. In this Photoshop photography video, we're going to be looking at doing what's called a soft light technique. And you can see it in here. We have this kind of warm glow over here on the left hand side, moving over to a bit of a blue tone over here. And to do this properly, it requires a lot of little tweaks and adjustments. As you can see over here on the right hand side in our layers, we have the background image down here. Let me just hide this group for a second. There's the original image. You can see how much we've warmed up and modified that image for this particular look. So to do that, we go through a whole bunch of steps in here. We start off with an adjustment layer down here, adjusting our curves, a little curve icon. This is just to get the picture in the best setting we can. The settings in here are going to depend upon your particular image, what it needs for fine tuning. It's just a little tweak on the exposure levels of the image. We then follow that by brightening up the image a bit, making it a bit more vibrant. We do that because we're going to be toning down the image. As we put in more stuff in here, it's going to make the image less contrasty. So we want to bring in some contrast to begin with up here to kind of help that out. We then begin setting up the values in here, starting off with a dark blue to help bring in and get things set up for our coloration later on. We then add in a warm filter on top of that. So first I have a dark blue and then a warm filter above that. We then come in and do another little brightness contrast, kind of a brightness contrast tweak on this. Notice that this uses a mask as well, a layer mask. We're only applying this brightness contrast up here, adjustment on the left hand side. And then finally we put in our warm coloration up here and then a blue coloration over here on the right hand side. Now because this is stacked layers and we're working with adjustment layers, each one of these layers is affecting the layer underneath. So it's important to have these in the right sequence if you want to match my look exactly. You can move things around, but you get a little different look on that. Once you have learned this basic technique, you can just copy the technique over and over again. It's very, very good standard technique. But once you've learned the technique, you then can play around with this and modify the different settings, modify the steps you use. You may even want to use different techniques in here once you kind of see how this whole thing is put together. Okay, let's go ahead now and start building this from scratch. Let me just close down this sample file. And we'll start here with the original image. There we go, just pretty straightforward. Now the first thing I always do whenever I'm working on an image is I copy the image onto a new layer. So I grab the image, copy it onto a new layer, just like that. Gives me a copy. That way I can hide that original. In case I do anything up here to damage this image, I can always go back to my original, which is right there inside the same file. It's just an insurance. In this case, we won't actually be doing anything on this image, but it's still just a habit that I like to be in, and I recommend that you do that just to always have a backup copy inside of your existing file. Okay, so there's our image. Now when you're working with this and doing your little tweaks on this, and we'll be doing some specific tweaks which will be helping us down the road, you can use any of your standard adjustments, your brightness contrast, levels, curves. I kind of like curves for this. You can even use your shadows and highlights. Now we'll be using curves specifically so we can look at different channels and adjust different channels. Since we're going for a warmer tone, we want to have some specific control of our warms and our cools. We'll take a look at that. But we want to do all of this as an adjustment layer so we're not touching our original image. So let's go over here to Layer, and then we're going to be doing an adjustment layer right here, and we'll be doing the curves, which is right there. This will give us a new layer. Just choose OK, and it puts that new layer above our original image. Let me just pull it over a little bit so you can see that. And what we're looking at here was called a histogram. This is showing us the values of the image. Your dark values are over here, your blacks are right down here, your grays, your midtone is right there, and then your whites over here. If you look at the image, most of the image is darker than a midtone gray. You can see right here, most of our image is kind of in this area here, which is on the darker side. You know, dark hair, dark trees. The sweater is a little bit darker than a midtone. A lot of darks in the background. There are some lights in here, and see the little peak right there on the white. That's going to be the white or the light right up in her hair right here, or possibly right there. One of those two spots will be the little peak. Not that many lights though. So the right side controls the lights, and the dark side controls the darks. Now we're going for a soft, warm light look, so we need to soften things down a little bit and brighten things up a little bit. We'll start off by looking at the overall picture. I can darken things or lighten up our darks by moving this in a little bit here. This is going to darken your darks on, see that? That darkens your darks down, or to lighten your darks up, move it up this scale. What is happening here, what's working is that these are your grays, your dark grays, your medium grays, and so forth. This is your black. If I move this to the right, I am moving the black into my grays. In other words, taking these grays and making these grays black. Over here, this is the value of black. If I pull this up, it's changing the value of black from black up into grays. So if I pull that up, what I'm doing is I'm lightening up my black values. And that's going to help us kind of warming up and softening up the image. Just a little bit, not much, just a little touch down here. Just kind of lightening up the darkest darks. We also want to lighten up our lights. And same thing in here. If I moved, this side here, it is clear to the top, so our whites are pure white. If I pulled this down, I would be moving our white down into towards the grays. I don't want to do that. I want to leave it as pure white. If I move it this way, I'm taking our pure white and moving it into our light values, making light values pure white. So moving this to the left is going to brighten up the light part of the picture. So let me just move that in a little bit here, and you can see what's happening as I do that. I'll go back and forth a little bit. It lightens up the light part of the picture. So I'll put it right about there. That looks pretty good. Now the actual settings in here will depend upon what your picture looks like. Just keep in mind that you want to brighten up your brights, and you want to soften up your darks a little bit. Now we want to also tweak the warm tones and the cool tones, because they're going to be warming up the image. We're going to be cooling down the shadows and warming up the highlights. Click on this little drop down. We have our RGB setting, that's the whole picture, and then it's broken down into channels: red channel, green channel, and blue channel. Your red channel is your warms, your green channel is your neutrals, and your blue channel is your cools. So to warm our warms up, let's click on the red and say, here we go, this is a histogram. There's the cools on the left hand side, warms on the or lights on the right hand side. You want to warm the lights up and cool down the dark side. So to do that, we want to bring the light side up in here. These are gray tones. Bring the gray tones up and bring the left side, the shadow tones, down a little bit. You can do that by placing points on this curve. There we go, there's 3 points. The midpoint controls that kind of locks that point in position. I can now take my midtone brights and warm them up a little bit. Just pull that up just a touch. Like that, it kind of warms up. You can see what's happening there. My lights go warmer. So to warm the lights up just a little bit, not much, just a touch. And then I can take some of the warmth out of my shadows. See what happens when I pull it down? The shadows go more blue. So I'll be pulling those down just a little bit, not much. Just a little tweak in there. Just a very, very slight S-curve. We're just kind of tweaking things at this point. But that's what we're doing, is we are taking some warmth out of our shadows and adding some warmth into our highlights. And we're doing that on the red channel first, because that's our warms. Let's now look at the cools. We want to do the same thing, but kind of the opposite on this one. We want to bring the coolness out of our warm colors. These are the light colors, and add some more coolness into our darker colors, our cool colors. So I'll do the exact same curve in here. I'll just click 3 times. In this case, I want to bring in some blue. See, there it is, brings in a lot of blue in there, darker stuff. So I want to bring in just a little bit of coolness into the darker tones and pull some of that blue out of the lighter tones. Just pull it down a little bit. And that will help then to make our light tones warmer and our dark tones cooler. So again, it's an S curve. So I have 2 S curves going on here. The red S curve, we're adding a little more on the right hand side, the light side, and taking a little bit out on the left hand side, the shadow side. On the blue, it's the exact opposite. We're taking out some blue out of the light side and adding in some blue in the shadow side. Okay, a little tweak beginning to push our image in a certain direction. Okay, now that that's done, we can go ahead and close our curves, and there's the curves layer. Okay, that's the image tweak. That's all I have to do for the image tweak. Let's just see how that looks now. See there, it's a little warmer overall, a little softer looking, and there's a little more bluish tones into our dark sides and a little warmer tones on our light side, so that's perfect. Okay, now you can see we've lost a bit of contrast with these adjustments. This adjusts our colors. We've lost a little bit of contrast. So let's bring back in some contrast. We'll do that with the vibrance layer. So again, we're going to be going up here to Layer, Adjustment Layer, Vibrance, right there. Choose OK. Here's our vibrance setting. Let's not worry about saturation. Leave that as is. We want to increase the vibrance. You can see what happens here. It makes it a lot more colorful. That's a lot less colorful. So we're increasing our brightness in here in about 50% or so. You know, a pretty good punch on that. I'll go to 56 on that. That's what I used before on my sample. So I've added a lot of punch in here. So here it is without, and there it is with. You can see we're bringing in a lot more color backing in without really changing the dark or light value. So here's our dark value. The light value is in the hair. And you can see the vibrance really hasn't changed the hair, and it really doesn't change the shadow side, but it's changing a lot in here. These are the midtones. So the vibrance is giving us back coloration into the midtones without changing our lights and our darks, which we just tweaked in the last setting. Okay, so that's taken care of. There's our vibrance setting. So we're beginning to build the overall look here for our new image, for the warm glow. Okay, now we're going to add in a special color layer in here to a fill layer. Layer, new fill layer, solid color. Choose OK. Here we go. Now this is going to be a dark blue, a specific dark blue. And the one I used was 18182D. Right there, if you want to match it exactly. So we're in our blues. It's on a very dark blue. It's kind of, you know, saturation level. It's right in the middle. And it's way down here towards the black. So it's a real dark blue. Choose OK. So there's our dark blue. Now this is going to help us with the dark side of our image. We'll be working with the bright side and the warm colors in just a bit. This is going to help the dark side of the image. So we have this, but we now need to blend this in with our picture. So we're using a blending mode. Right there, here's all of our blending modes. And in this case, you want to be using the exclusion mode right down there. And there we go. So here it is without, and there it is with. You can see what it's doing. It is excluding that particular value out of the image, and that's adding to our soft effect, you know, the softness effect on the whole image. So there we go. That takes care of our control for that. Now we want to warm the overall image up. This is using an exclusion layer, and it's excluding out anything that's on, you know, the really dark blue stuff, taking that out of the image, leaving everything else. We now want to warm the whole picture back up again because we have this blue in here. So I'll warm that back up again using a photo filter. Again, back up to our layers and adjustment layer, and want to use a photo filter right there. Click on that one, choose OK. I want to use the warming filter. Here's the warming filter. That's the default filter. So that works out pretty well. You can leave all of these settings at the defaults. That works out just fine. See, there it is without, and here it is with. So we're putting the warmth now back into this image. There's the warming filter. Okay, we're getting pretty close now to adding in our fancy special effects on this. So there is the photo warming filter. Now we're going to come in and adjust the brightness and contrast on the image. We're going to limit that over here on the upper left hand side. Let's just first do our brightness contrast, and then we'll limit the brightness contrast setting as well. We want to really punch the area up here. This is where the light source is going to be. We want to have that punchier. Down here is the cool side. We'll let that just go as is. We want to punch the contrast up here where the light source is. So layer, new adjustment layer again, brightness contrast. There we go. Now I want to bring both of these up a little bit. Let's bring up the brightness. Now again, this is going to be for our bright side, so just pay attention to the area up there. Don't worry about anything else. Bring this way up to like 82 or so. So really bright up here. Contrast, we want to bring in some more contrast as well. I'll bring it up to about 32. Again, I'm looking at just this area here. That's all I care about, upper left-hand corner. Okay, so that looks good there. Of course, we don't want it on the rest of the picture, so now we're going to do something over here on our mask, on the layer mask. I want to have white up here. White shows, black hides. So I want to have white upper left-hand corner, and then I want to fade out to black down below here. Now we're going to be doing kind of a curve area up here. So what I want is to have a curve with a soft edge. And we can do that with the gradient. Go from white to black, that's fine. Let's go to our gradient tool. White to black, that's our first option, that's perfect. We want the radial gradient, right there is the second one. So go to the upper left hand corner, click in here, and let's drag down to the right corner and see what we get. Okay, that's too large on that. Let me just undo that. Let me try going halfway down. And that's better. Maybe a little further than that, maybe about 2/3 of the way down. Okay, that's pretty good. Maybe just a little, come down just a little bit down here. Looks like on my image about 2 inches by 2 inches, and then down about that much. Okay, so now I have a nice bright area up on here, and then it's this brightness contrast is doing nothing down there, but it's doing a lot of brightness contrast up here, so it begins to build in our light source upper left hand corner. Now all we have left is to put in our coloration in here. I want to color the upper left hand corner and color the right hand side as well. Now to do this we'll be using a very large brush, so I'm going to zoom out. Here, I'm just doing it from the menu so you can see what I'm doing. We'll zoom out, we'll make a new layer up here. Let's bring in our warmth on this side, so we need to have a new brush color in here. So we want to have a kind of a nice orange. Nice kind of orangey color in here someplace. Make sure you're staying up here on the real, clear to the top, so your saturation is full saturation. Pretty warm. Maybe a little lighter. Just a nice kind of warm color on that. I think right about there somewhere looks pretty good. Now I want to grab a large brush. See, that's a real small brush. Let's make it a much larger brush. Hardness at 0. And let me just bring my brush size. There we go. Real big brush. That's a bit too much. I think maybe on this particular image looks like about 1,000 pixels be about right. Okay. And then I'm just going to click a few times and give myself a big bright orange spot up there, and make sure it comes over the image, just over the girl a little bit right in here. So a big bright orange spot. Now I want to blend this into the image. I don't want to just have a big orange spot on top of the image like that, so I want to blend it in, and we'll be using a screen mode on that, or a blending mode rather, and screen, and that just blends it into that upper left hand side. Now I want to cool down the right hand side, so same trick. Let's just add a new layer. Let's find a cool blue somewhere in the cyans, somewhere in here someplace, kind of a cyan, and then I want to cool down that side a bit. Same thing, we're going to blend this in, so blending mode. Now I'm going into the shadows on this one, so we want to be darkening this. Let's go ahead and do a darken, and it's going to darken that down. Now final thing you want to do here is you can then tweak these, tweak the opacity amounts on these until you get just the right effect. So you can tone down the overall effect on these things by playing with the opacity settings. And that allows you to adjust the amount on these different areas in here. So it's just a matter of just tweaking until you get just the look that you want. It will depend upon which picture you're using, but there we go. There is our kind of warm, soft, light look. So you can see these steps that we went through again. We first tweaked the image, made sure that we got our levels where we wanted them, and we brought up the warmth a little bit in the warm light tones, brought down the cool dark tones. We then brought our vibrance back in again, which brought in more contrast into our mid-tone areas. We then tweaked the darks with this layer here, warmed everything up with a photo filter, added in some brightness up here, upper left-hand corner for our light, colorized that brightness, and colorized the shadow side, giving us that warm effect. So there you go. That is how to do the soft light technique. Okay, now let me just bring this back up to fit on screen. Once you have it in place, you can then tweak all of your settings down. Now, let's say I wanted to have a little more vibrance in here. Just double click on the icon, brings back up your vibrance setting, and then you can tweak this for whatever effect you want to achieve. And you can adjust your saturation and so forth. So you can come in here and you can play around with these and tweak them once the basics images is set in place. So there we go. Again, that's how to do that warm light look. Let's just now see how this compares. I'm going to put a group up here, and then let's just grab all of this stuff, push this into the group, and let's take all of these, push these up into the group. There we go. Now I can hide that, show the original. Here's our original, and then here's our modified version. So there's the original one, and there's the modified effect with that warm, soft light and glow. Okay, there you go. That's how you do that. Again, as you can see, there's quite a few steps to do this. A lot of stuff involving these layers, these adjustment layers in here. And you need to have these in the right sequence to get the same effect that I was achieving. So make sure you follow that precisely. Thank you for watching this special Photoshop photography project video. Don't forget to subscribe so that you will get first notice of new project videos in the future. Just click on this link right here where it says subscribe here. You can get all 12 project videos in this series along with 26 special videos demonstrating the tools and techniques that I used in these projects by clicking on this link right down here. And then thank you again for watching this training video.